Hello everyone, my name is Bartek, and today I would like to talk to you about the effective web performance techniques in 2023. Basically, we will go through the whole process of the website optimization, and yeah, let's just get it started. First of all, correct me if I'm wrong, but in my opinion, the web performance optimization approach has changed over the last few years. In 2020, when Google announced the core Web Vitals, everyone was so much oriented just to the load time performance and just to the single page visit testing, using one of the lab testing environment tools like Lighthouse, PageSpeed Insights. Then everyone tried to improve the metrics like largest contentful paint, cumulative layout shift. We got also the first input delay metric that tries to show the interaction issues, but in my opinion, it doesn't give the appropriate results because it doesn't come from the real users. Then in 2023, we shouldn't only focus on the load time performance, but also on the runtime performance. So basically everything what's happening later on the website as soon as the website is loaded. So basically all the interactions like scrolling down to a section, submitting a form, clicking a link, something like that. And everything is oriented to the user journey. So everything really, the whole user session. And the performance data should come from the real user monitoring system, so from the real users and from devices. Obviously, we got the Chrome user experience report, but in my opinion, it doesn't give the appropriate results because it tracks only the Chrome browser, and there's no details really, but we can, for example, easily identify which element is affected, for example, by the INP metric. So basically, the user journey is the keyword of this presentation. Real user data, so as I said, ideally real user monitoring. And these days, in my opinion, nobody cares about the Lighthouse score. We shouldn't focus on that, in my opinion. And in terms of the journey, I mean the whole experience. So overall site speed, like loading, but also the transitions, interactions. We got the interaction to next paint that is becoming the core Web Vital in 2024, which is really difficult one to be improved, but I will talk about it a little bit later. So in terms of the process, as soon as we get the data, ideally from the real user monitoring system, we should split the performance results per page type, like product listing page, or for example, single product page. In this way, we can notice easily which the most important page on our website is affected by some wrong scores in terms of the performance. Obviously, no surprise, we should focus on mobile the most. And in terms of the real user monitoring systems, we got a lot of options on the market these days. We got Speed Curve, we got Debug Bear, but what's most interesting, you can also install the real user monitoring system by yourself. For example, utilizing the Google Analytics 4 and then showing the data, for example, through the BigQuery from Google. And as soon as we know where the issue is on our website, the next step, really important one, is the waterfall analysis. I do recommend to use the web page test tool because it returns really nice waterfall and a lot of details really that are really useful and helpful to optimize the website later. As soon as we get the waterfall, the first metric is basically the first request on our website, so basically the HTML. And the time to first byte is essential one. If we do not improve that metric, basically we cannot do too much with any other metrics. So basically the server response time is really important. And there might be some issues with backend, with database, with server, etc. And then the next really important step is the head section of every HTML document optimization. So basically, the order of the CSS style sheets and the order of the JavaScript. Because, for example, the JavaScript may affect the CSS, and the CSS may affect the JavaScript. And basically, in the head section, we got also a lot of meta tags. And I would like to recommend you to use this tool. This is capo.js. Basically, it can be installed as a Chrome extension, but, for example, can be executed also as a DevTools snippet. And basically, it returns the existing order of all the CSS and scripts in your head section on your website, and then returns the right order. So basically, it is a tool that helps you to get your head section in the right order. Here's an example of a website before the capo.js help, let's say, and the largest contentful paint here is almost 6 seconds. And only after reordering the CSS and the JavaScript, we may achieve this kind of result. Next thing, if you got a WordPress project, for example, you can install that as a plugin. So basically, it does everything automatically, magically. You do not have to worry about anything. It automatically reorders all the scripts and CSS on the fly, and that's it. Going back to our process, basically, yes, we should only load as much as resources as needed. So basically the lazy loading. But I don't mean only the image lazy loading. I mean, for example, iframe lazy loading, widgets lazy loading, maybe even whole section lazy loading. And we should rely on the HTML as much as possible. Basically, the HTML first approach is really essential one, and I will talk about it a little bit later. But for example, if you got an image on your website and you embed that image through CSS, through the background image, maybe you should consider trying to embed that image through the IMG HTML tag, because in this way, that resource is discovered by the browser so much quicker. If you got a third-party chat, maybe you shouldn't load the JavaScript from the beginning and affecting, for example, the total blocking time metric. Maybe you should create your own fake HTML button, for example, and load the JavaScript and execute that code only on demand when user really needs that chat to be used. If you got, for example, a Google map, the same thing. Maybe you shouldn't load it from the very beginning. Maybe you could, for example, utilize the intersection observer API to detect where user is on the website and then load that script on demand. So basically, very good pattern is to delay loading and execution of the scripts until interaction. And here's an example. We got a website, and in the footer we have simple newsletter sign up for. It's invisible at the moment, but it will load the JavaScript from HubSpot only when we start interacting with the site. That form is not visible for user because it is in the footer, right? So user has to always scroll down to that section. So if we start interacting with the site, this script has been loaded now and has been executed now. And this way, the total blocking time, for example, is not affected. This example is based on my own solution, which is called fscript. You can find it on my own GitHub repo. But basically what it does is every script that we can delay, we change the script HTML tag to something different. For example, in this case, it is just fscript. Basically, it is not a script in this moment. But as soon as we start interacting with the site, we change that fscript to the normal standard script HTML tag, which means that in this particular moment, that script will be executed. Next thing in terms of the process is the assets prioritization. As soon as we have the waterfall, we can notice that some of the resources are not loaded with the highest priority, or for example, should be loaded with low priority, but do load with the high priority. Example, maybe you got the above the fold area and you got 2 images over there. And only one of them is the largest contentful paint, and the second one is not that important. So maybe we could deprioritize the second image using, for example, the fetch priority HTML tag that can be added not only to the script, but for example, also to the image, link, something like that, and use fetch priority with the low value. This way, that particular resource will be loaded with the low priority. And on the opposite, if we got, for example, really important largest contentful paint image and it loads with the low priority, we could change this to the high value. Okay, next thing, JavaScript. Everybody knows that JavaScript is the biggest bottleneck on almost every website. And these days, lots of developers do use the Next.js as a solution, which is good because it does a lot of good things. We got, for example, the image component, the font component. We do not have to worry about that. And we have static site generation, server-side rendering, etc. There's also the React under the hood, which is really popular. However, as an every framework, it has exactly the same issues. So basically, for example, hydration issue, JavaScript size issue, because it loads the boilerplate-like JavaScript from that framework from the beginning, always when we visit that page, which directly affects the total blocking time metric. Not sure if you have ever heard about it, but there are some other options on the market, like Astro framework. And it doesn't mean that it is a new framework that you have to learn from scratch, learn some new syntax or something like that. You still can create your UI components using one of your favorite libraries or framework like Svelte, Vue, React, etc. But there's a totally different approach when it comes to the server-side rendering, and there's also the Zero.js architecture and the HTML architecture, the island architecture and HTML approach. And basically, here's an example of some websites. every website in most cases consists of some components, right? But not every component needs the JavaScript to be loaded and executed from the very beginning. We can have some static sidebar, static image, static text, but only some of the components are interactive and do really need the JavaScript. And that JavaScript doesn't have to be doesn't have to load and be executed from the very beginning. And what I did is I created a simple website in Next.js and in Astro. Basically, it's just a heading, image, text. And at the bottom, there's one interactive component, which is the tabs component. And that tabs component was created in React. In Astro, the difference is we can decide when a particular component can be executed when it comes to the JavaScript. However, the HTML for that component is generated from the very beginning. So basically, we reserve the space, for example, for that component. We got the HTML from the very beginning, but the JavaScript is not loaded because it's not really needed yet, because user hasn't started interacting with that component. So we can basically decide when that component should be executed from the JavaScript perspective. I think those three values like visible, idle, and load are self-explanatory. And in that particular demo, I decided to use the client visible. So basically, that component will be interactive only when it starts being visible to user. And if we compare the waterfalls between those two pages, we can see that in Next.js, we always load a lot of JavaScript, the boilerplate like JavaScript code, as I said. But in Astro, we do not load any JavaScript because we can't see that component yet. However, you may ask me, that comparison is not really appropriate because we should compare those pages with the same behavior. So in Astro, we also should load the JavaScript and execute it exactly how it is in Next.js, and let's see how it goes. And basically, that's the result. Even in that particular case, with Astro, with the client load value, so basically we load and execute the JavaScript exactly how it is in Next.js, we load so much less JavaScript, and it does not affect the total blocking time. The page weight, for example, in Astro is twice less. Even though the tabs component, as we know, is created with the same library, which is the React. So basically, what I would like to say is less JS and more HTML. Maybe in your future project, you should just consider different solutions, different examples of some frameworks that focus on the HTML really and how the HTML looks like, and just less JS. Let's just execute the JavaScript when it's really needed. Okay, next thing is the interactions. As I said, it's really difficult metric to be improved, but at the same time, in my opinion, it's really helpful and one of the best metrics because it really focuses on the real user and their perception of the site when it comes to the interactions. Probably you got the INP alert from Google Search Console some not long time ago. But if you go to the details of the INP alert, there's just a group of URLs that were affected by the INP, the wrong INP score. But the key point is there's no details. You do not know which particular element, and for example, selector, was responsible for that interaction that was affected by the poor INP score. So basically, again, the real user monitoring is the key point here, because based on the real user monitoring, we can gain the details about the interactions and the particular elements that were responsible for that particular interaction. Here's an example of the real user monitoring tool like speed curve. And basically, when it comes to the interaction to next paint, you can see the whole user session. You can exactly see what happened on the website for that particular user, which device user was on, and which element was responsible for the interaction. As soon as we know that from the real user monitoring, the next step, in my opinion, is to use the Web Vitals Chrome extension. Basically, it helps you to just make sure that that particular element, when it comes to the interaction, is bad. As soon as this is installed, I recommend you to check that one setting, like console logging. Based on that, obviously, if you go to the performance tab and you change the setting CPU to, for example, 6 slowdown or 4 slowdown, and you start interacting with the site, you will see that the INP score is logged into the console log in your DevTools. Basically, you can just see what exactly is happening, and you can just make sure that that particular interaction is bad. The INP score consists of three things. The first one is the input delay. Basically, if that value is high, it means that other tasks are still running. Basically, if you load a website and you start interacting with the site immediately when some JavaScript was still loading and executed in the background, that particular metric, let's say, can be affected. Processing time, that means that something is wrong with our JavaScript code in most cases. And when it comes to the presentation delay, if that value is high, it is just a rendering issue. I have created a demo. This is a really basic one. There's an image, and if we click that image, it will be enlarged. I use for that really popular library like Glidebox in JavaScript. And the next step, as we have noticed that this is something problematic on our website, is to record that interaction through the Performance tab in the DevTools. And in this way, we can see exactly what's happening in the main thread of the browser and what exactly makes the main thread busy when it comes to the JavaScript function, rendering, etc. We can just see and go, for example, to a single line of code in DevTools and see which particular line of code is problematic and then try to debug it and improve it. As I said, I use the Glidebox, and here's the standard implementation. But the thing is about the selectors. I would really like you to focus on that and how you write the selectors and how performant they are. So basically, that particular standard implementation was rewritten by me in this way. So basically, instead of going through all the elements, all the links on our website, I decided to create some JS Glidebox CSS class, and then create an event listener only on those elements, and then through the setTimeout function, run the Glidebox function on demand. Basically, that setTimeout function helps browser to decide when this particular JavaScript function should be executed in the right order and when the main thread is not that busy. And that's it. However, not only the JavaScript is always the issue when it comes to the interaction to NextPaint. In my demo, I used some image in this size, but only if I reduce the size twice, it looks like the presentation delay, because it is about the rendering issue. I reduce the time so much. So basically, the image size, when it comes to the interaction to NextPaint, really matters. So in terms of the results, after optimization, I mean the JavaScript code optimization I did plus the image size change, the result is like this. So basically right now, if we test that site again, click on the photo, and we can see that the INP score is so much better than it was before. Next thing, really, really important one when it comes to the interactions is the invalidation. Basically, what does it mean and what it is? It is a website state change. So basically, if we got a button and what triggers opening the mobile menu, and the mobile menu is rendered, that is it means that something had to be invalidated, and there had to be some, layout phase happened in our browser in order to paint that for the real user. And as soon as we record that interaction, we can see in many times that there are some style recalculation, and then the layout. These operations are really expensive for every browser. And for example, in that mobile menu opening, in most cases we could just create another CSS class that changes the CSS property from display none to display block. But it doesn't mean that if we add one CSS class, it affects just one element. Because if we record that, we can notice that it affects, for example, tens of hundreds or even thousands of elements. Here's an example I took from Twitter. So basically, just one change affected 15K of elements. Why? Here's the answer. So basically, that guy tried to, through the JavaScript API, update the transform CSS property to that value like translate X. And the question is, why? Why 15K of elements were affected? And here's the answer. So basically, how we write the CSS also is really important one thing in terms of the interactions and how they perform. So basically, browser had to go through all the elements where the style HTML attribute was added, and then try to match that CSS rule only to that one particular element. So basically, watch out how you write the CSS, because it really matters when it comes to INP. I would like to recommend you the Edge DevTools because you can easily notice how your CSS selectors do perform, and then based on that, you can just improve that. When it comes to the third parties, some JavaScripts, etc., it's not really easy, as you can imagine. However, if you use, for example, Google Tag Manager, I would like to recommend you on how many elements you add the event listeners, because it really matters. If you track, for example, the link clicking, maybe you shouldn't send all the events on the link click to the third parties, because it may affect INP as well. Maybe you should just remember that decision of the link clicking through, for example, local storage, and just let user go to that particular page immediately and send the events a little bit later. Maybe that's the answer. So basically, we got the interactions, JavaScript, recalculation, style, layout, invalidation topics, etc. I would like you to remember that adding one CSS class doesn't mean that it always affects just one element, and just record the interaction because it's really important. If you use some JavaScript functions like inner text, offset width, get bounding client rec in JavaScript, so basically everything what forces browser to calculate something, that's a really expensive operation, and just make sure that you use it safely. JavaScript and CSS selectors, please watch out how you write them, avoid global invalidation, and basically the content visibility in the CSS, for example, is also a good answer because you can render the elements that are invisible for user from the very beginning, and you can just show them up when user scrolls down to that particular section. Quick summary. Stop focusing on the lighthouse and just choose the real user monitoring, because you can gain more details and you can see exactly what's happening for your real users on your real website. Then analyze the waterfall, the resources order, assets prioritization is really important, lazy loading, not only of the images, but also other stuff. HTML first, less JavaScript, maybe Astro, maybe Quick, there are other frameworks available on the market. Layout invalidation, style recalculation, please just record the interaction and make sure that it's been done in the good way. And do not freeze the interaction, I mean, try to help a browser to execute those functions, for example, a little bit better, for example, through the set timeout or request idle callback in JavaScript. And basically, yes, the selectors. Please make sure that you write them in the performant way. Thank you very much. My name is Bartek. I am CEO and CTO at Studio Sidekicks Bigger Picture. If you want to see more interesting stuff about the web performance, you can just visit my website, webdevinsider.pl. There's also the English version of the site. Thank you very much, and hopefully you enjoyed my presentation.
Thank you for this wonderful presentation. I'm sure we all learned a lot, but there's one question appeared on Slido. Does it still make sense to check Google Speed metrics, i.e. LCP, in 2023?
Could you say again? Does it still make sense to check Google Speed metrics? Well, the first step really is always the real user monitoring, in my opinion. That's a really important one. You should gain the data from your real user. But as soon as you know that there is some particular issue with the LCP, you can use the Google just to make sure from the technical point of view, from the development point of view, that something is wrong and what other elements, for example, may affect that. So basically, yes, it is important, but as the second step. If page speed insight as the first step is, does bring some poor score, you should ideally compare that with the real user data. And based on that, you should just make a decision how to improve that.